Have you ever experienced a place so eerie, so unnervingly silent, that it felt like the very forest itself was watching you? Imagine setting out for a peaceful solo camping trip, only to discover that the wilderness holds dark secrets, secrets that might just be more than your mind can comprehend. What if one night you found yourself not alone, but being watched by something lurking in the shadows? Tonight, I'll take you through a chilling journey of isolation, fear, and mystery. Get ready, because what happened in the depths of Rondak Park is a story you'll never forget. The main character of our story is someone who has always found solace in the quiet embrace of nature. Born and raised in the hustle and bustle of city life, he's grown weary of the constant noise, the blaring horns, the endless chatter, the pressure of deadlines, and the ceaseless rush of people. The concrete jungle, with its towering buildings and crowded streets, has started to feel like a cage, one that confines him more and more each day. He longs for a break, for a place where he can hear the rustling of leaves instead of car engines, and breathe the fresh, clean air, free from the pollution of the city. The idea of getting away from it all has been growing in his mind for weeks. He wants to reconnect with the earth, to rediscover the peace he once felt in nature's presence. After much thought, he decides on a solo camping trip, something that will not only give him the escape he's craving, but also challenge him to truly immerse himself in the wild, away from the distractions of everyday life. His destination? The secluded Rondak Park in upstate New York, a place he's heard of only through whispers of those who seek refuge in its tranquility. Unlike other popular destinations, this park offers a rare combination of solitude and natural beauty. It's a place that promises peace, with few tourists, fewer modern amenities, and an abundance of wildlife. It's early summer when he sets off. The skies are clear, and the weather is perfect, just the right temperature for a backpacking trip. As he drives, leaving behind the constant noise of the city, the sense of anticipation grows. His mind is filled with images of towering trees, clear streams, and the pure silence that only nature can provide. Little does he know, his quest for solitude will soon lead him to face something far darker and more mysterious than he ever could have imagined. The excitement of the upcoming adventure fills his every thought as he begins preparing for the trip. With a sense of determination, he heads to the local outdoor store, the bright neon sign hanging above the door beckoning him inside. As he steps through the threshold, the familiar scent of fresh camping gear and adventure stirs something deep within him. He's surrounded by shelves lined with sleeping bags, tents, and gear that promise a taste of the wild. He takes his time, methodically scanning each section, ensuring he picks the best equipment for his solo journey. The first stop, a new tent. His old one, worn from previous trips, had seen better days. He selects a lightweight, compact model, perfect for backpacking, sturdy enough to withstand whatever nature throws at him. He imagines himself lying inside it at night, gazing up at the stars through the mesh windows, the gentle rustling of the trees outside lulling him to sleep. Next, he moves on to a sleeping bag, one rated for cooler nights in the mountains. As his fingers trace the soft, insulated fabric, he envisions the crisp air of the forest and the warmth it will provide when the temperature drops. A sense of peace washes over him just thinking about it. He gathers the freeze-dried meals, trail mix, and protein bars, imagining quiet evenings by the fire, enjoying a simple meal while watching the sunset. His excitement grows with every item he adds to his cart, each piece of equipment representing one step closer to the serenity he's craving. Finally, he picks up a map of the area, unfolding it in his hands. He traces the routes he plans to take, his mind already wandering through the trails, imagining the peaceful solitude he'll find once he's deep in the woods. The anticipation builds, and with each passing moment, his excitement for the trip grows, the pull of nature calling louder than ever before. With his backpack packed and the road ahead, the adventure begins. He pulls out of the bustling city, the hum of traffic fading with every mile. As he drives further from the familiar streets, a sense of calm washes over him, replaced by an exhilaration he hasn't felt in years. The buildings and noise gradually give way to rolling hills, and the air begins to feel different, fresher, cleaner, as if the very atmosphere is welcoming him into its embrace. The highway stretches out before him, flanked by vibrant green fields and the distant shadows of mountains rising majestically into the sky. He passes small towns, their charming storefronts and friendly faces offering a quiet comfort, but it's the open road that captures his heart. The scenery around him shifts from the monotony of suburban sprawl to the untamed beauty of nature. Lush forests, winding rivers, and scattered wildflowers painting the landscape in bursts of color. As he nears the entrance to Rondak Park, his anticipation builds. The sign marking the entrance looms ahead, and he turns off the highway, following the smaller roads that snake deeper into the Adirondack Mountains. The dense forest begins to encircle him, the trees towering on both sides like ancient sentinels standing guard over the wilderness. The sunlight filters through the canopy above, casting a soft, dappled glow across the forest floor, where ferns and moss blanket the earth. Finally, after a few hours of winding roads, he reaches his destination, a secluded campsite beside a gentle creek. The air is crisp, the sound of water trickling over rocks blending harmoniously with the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. He sets down his gear, feeling the weight of his pack lift off his shoulders. The space around him is serene. No bustling crowds, no traffic, just the quiet murmur of the forest and the soft gurgle of the stream. He takes a deep breath, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling his lungs, and for the first time in what feels like forever, he feels truly at peace. This is the solitude he had longed for. As night falls, the forest around him grows eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the lively hum of the day. The sun slips below the horizon, leaving behind a soft twilight that gradually fades into the deep darkness of the woods. The last rays of light disappear, and with it, the air becomes cooler, heavier. The stillness is overwhelming. All at once, the normal sounds of nature, the distant calls of birds, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, seem to vanish, replaced by an unsettling silence. The only noise is the faint, rhythmic sound of his own breathing as he sits by the campfire, trying to shake off the creeping unease that seems to grow with each passing minute. Suddenly, there's a rustle in the bushes near his tent. At first, he dismisses it, attributing the sound to the wind or perhaps a curious animal. But then it comes again, closer this time. A soft crackling sound like footsteps moving slowly through the underbrush. His heart races as his eyes dart toward the source of the noise. He tells himself it's just a raccoon or a deer, animals that roam freely in the night. Yet a strange feeling begins to creep over him, a tightening in his chest that he can't explain. The rustling continues, and this time it sounds deliberate, almost too careful, as though someone or something is moving with intention, not just passing through. He grips the flashlight in his hand, his knuckles whitening as he listens intently. The crackling of leaves grows louder, closer. A sudden cold shiver runs down his spine, and for the first time, he wonders if he's truly alone. His thoughts race as he tries to calm himself. Maybe it's just his imagination playing tricks on him, the isolation messing with his mind. But the feeling of being watched, the sensation of invisible eyes on him, won't leave. The silence is now thick, oppressive, and the darkness feels heavier than ever. He can almost hear his own pulse, quickening with each moment, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. The sounds around him grow increasingly closer, the rustling of leaves becoming more deliberate, more defined. It's no longer just the wind. There is something moving in the shadows, something deliberate. His pulse quickens as he grips the flashlight tighter, his knuckles white from the pressure. The stillness of the forest has been replaced by a growing tension, the air thick with an unspoken presence. He listens, straining his ears, the sound of footsteps becoming unmistakable, as if someone or something is carefully navigating around his campsite. His heart is pounding now, echoing in his ears. He stands up slowly, his breath shallow, and calls into the darkness. Is anyone there? His voice shakes slightly, and the silence that follows is unnerving. Nothing. No reply. Just the distant chirping of night insects and the soft crackling of the fire. He waits, his eyes darting into the dark, trying to make out shapes in the distance. Then, in the corner of his eye, he sees it. A shadow. A figure standing perfectly still near the edge of the tree line. At first, he thinks it might be a trick of the light, a play of shadows cast by the flickering fire. But as he stares, he realizes it's too solid, too defined. The figure is tall, unmoving, and oddly human-shaped, but its face is obscured, lost in the deep shadows of the forest. It's there, watching, waiting. His breath catches in his throat. A cold shiver runs down his spine as a wave of panic crashes over him. His legs feel weak, his body frozen for a moment in sheer terror. The figure doesn't move, doesn't speak. It just stands there, silent, like a dark presence in the night. His mind races, and in a burst of fear, he reacts instinctively. Without thinking, he turns and runs, his legs carrying him through the dark, away from the campsite, away from whatever that thing is. His heart pounds in his chest, each step driven by sheer survival as the darkness closes in around him. Panic surges through him like a tidal wave, overwhelming every rational thought. He doesn't even think twice, he just runs. The tent, his belongings, everything is left behind in his frantic escape. His heart is pounding in his chest, and his breath comes in shallow gasps as he sprints into the woods, the beam of his flashlight barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. The cold night air stings his skin, but it's nothing compared to the fear that claws at his insides. Every branch and every bush he passes seems to reach out, scratching at him, tearing at his clothes and skin. His legs ache, and his mind races, but his body keeps moving, propelled by the overwhelming need to get away. The flashlight wavers in his trembling hand, casting fleeting shadows that dance around him, only to vanish into the blackness. The sound of his footsteps is the only thing that fills his ears, the thudding of his heart louder than anything else in the forest. He doesn't dare look back. He can feel the presence behind him, but he refuses to acknowledge it. The trees seem to close in on him, the forest becoming denser, darker, and more foreboding with each step. His breaths come in ragged gasps, his body screaming for rest, but there's no time. He can't stop. Not now. Just when he thinks his legs will give out, a faint light appears in the distance. A small cabin, its windows glowing with warmth and safety. Desperation fuels him as he stumbles toward it, his mind barely registering the pain in his side. He reaches the door and pounds on it with all his strength, his fists banging against the wood in frantic desperation. A moment later, the door creaks open, revealing an elderly man, his face etched with concern. Before the man can speak, he blurts out, "Please, someone's out there. I need help." The old man's eyes widen in surprise, but without hesitation, he steps aside, gesturing for him to enter. The man stumbles inside, collapsing against the wall, the weight of his fear momentarily lifted but still haunting him. The door shuts behind him, locking out the dark, the unknown, and whatever it is that chased him through the woods. The door creaks open, and an elderly man steps into the light. His eyes are wide with concern as he takes in the sight of the frightened, disheveled man standing in his doorway. Without a word, he steps aside, ushering him into the warmth of the small cabin. The door closes with a soft thud, shutting out the chilling night air and the fears that follow him from the woods. The man collapses into a chair, his hands trembling as he tries to catch his breath. He looks up at the stranger, his voice shaky as he begins to recount the terrifying experience. His words spill out in a rush. How he'd been alone at his campsite, how something was watching him, the shadowy figure at the edge of the trees, the panic that overtook him as he fled. His heart races just recalling it, and he looks at the elderly man for some kind of explanation. The old man listens intently, his face solemn but not surprised. When the young man finishes, the elderly man leans forward, his hands clasped together in front of him. "You're not the first," he says quietly, his voice carrying a weight of knowledge. "This place, it's not like the others. There are stories, strange stories, about people who wander off and never come back. Some say it's the woods, others say it's something else." The man pauses, glancing towards the window as if checking for something in the night. "I've heard tales of things, people even, who aren't really people, not the kind you think. Sometimes those who wander too deep never return as themselves. Sometimes they never return at all." His words hang in the air, thick with warning. He leans back, eyeing the man carefully. "You've been lucky tonight," he adds, "but you have to be careful. Not everyone you meet out here is what they seem. Some folks, they aren't who they say they are. And some places, well, they change you." His voice lowers. "If you ever come back here, remember, trust your instincts, and don't trust just anyone." The weight of the man's words lingers in the room, a chilling reminder of the dark mystery that surrounds the forest. The morning sun creeps through the cabin's windows, casting a soft light over the room. The elderly man hands the young man a steaming cup of coffee, his face still etched with concern. "Ready?" he asks quietly, looking into the young man's eyes as if trying to gauge his readiness. The young man nods, though a sense of unease still lingers in his chest. He's not sure if he's ready, but the thought of returning to the campsite is something he can't avoid. The fear from the night before has not completely left him, and part of him wonders if he'll ever truly be free of it. Together, they step outside, the crisp morning air biting at their skin as they make their way back through the woods. The forest seems different now, quieter, almost as if holding its breath. The young man's eyes flicker nervously between the trees, half expecting something to move in the shadows. The path to the campsite feels longer than it did the day before, each step heavier, each rustle in the underbrush making his heart race. When they finally reach the clearing, the sight of the campsite brings a strange sense of calm, yet it's laced with a lingering tension. His tent is still standing, untouched, as if nothing had happened. His backpack, sleeping bag, and cooking gear are all exactly where he left them. Everything is in place, not a thing out of order. There's no sign of the shadowy figure, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. But despite the normalcy, something doesn't feel right. The air around him feels thicker, charged with an unsettling energy. A strange, inexplicable chill runs down his spine as he scans the area. It's as though the forest is watching him, holding some kind of secret he's not meant to understand. He kneels to pack up his things, but his mind races. What had really happened last night? What had he seen or hadn't seen? The more he tries to make sense of it, the more his thoughts spiral, as though something supernatural is lingering just out of reach. The feeling of being watched returns, and he can't shake the sense that something or someone is still out there. As the young man packs his final belongings into the car, the weight of the event still lingers in the air, pressing against him. His hands tremble slightly as he slams the trunk shut, the sound echoing through the quiet forest. The elderly man stands a few feet away, his eyes sharp, watching him intently. The morning light is now bright and welcoming, yet the young man can't shake the chill that's still gripping his heart. He feels like the forest is still holding something from him, something that's just beyond his understanding. "You'll be all right," the old man says softly, his voice low and measured. "But remember, not all stories from this place are meant to be solved. Some mysteries, some things, they stay hidden, and they're better left that way." The words sink in, their meaning settling like a heavy fog in the pit of his stomach. He nods, his mind racing with confusion and doubt. He wants to believe it was all just his imagination, some trick of the mind brought on by isolation and fear. But deep down, a part of him knows that there was something more, something that doesn't belong in the world he knows. As he drives away from Rondak Park, the trees slowly fade from view in his rearview mirror. The landscape stretches out ahead of him, but the feeling of unease doesn't leave. It follows him like a shadow he can't outrun. The road feels endless, and for the first time, he wonders if he'll ever escape the feeling that something in those woods is still watching him. Had he really encountered something supernatural, or was it simply the stress of being alone, lost in a world so far removed from everything familiar? The questions remain unanswered, hanging in the air, and the forest stays silent, its secrets hidden, its mysteries intact. And so the story ends, leaving only the echo of a question. What was truly out there in the darkness? Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's ghost story. See you in the next, even more thrilling stories. If possible, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support me in creating more ghost stories for you. Thank you so much. Goodbye, and see you again.